For the next 40 hours or so, we're going to be talking about you. And this is, I renamed the show. I renamed it. So I woke up this morning and I put on this shirt and I thought it doesn't really fit. And I was like, what's wrong? What's wrong with me? What is all this about? Bought a couple of shirts at H&M. I was going to draw on them. I didn't draw on them. I was like, what's wrong? What's wrong with me? I cried to you last night. Awkward. What's wrong with me? I'll tell you in about 40 minutes' time. No. My parents divorced at a pretty young age. It was very complicated. And sometimes I thought I was the problem. And I was like, what's wrong with me? As I grew up, my brain took a strange turn for a very long time. It was like I thought it was a turn that we were going to come back onto, but that's just how I am. For a long time as a teenager, I thought, what's wrong with me? So I used to write. I used to write a lot. I used to write poetry, probably like that, and sometimes I used to rap, probably like that. This gentleman here edits a rap podcast that you probably all know, pointing you out. And I used to think, what's wrong with me? I'm just lost in these words all the time, and I can't find my way out. And is there a way out? What's wrong with me? Been with my wife for 22 years. Apparently, I'm not perfect. And every time I hear that, I'm like, what's wrong with me? I've got 2 kids. One just turned 13, got his hair cut 2 weeks ago. Used to have hair your length, Casper. What's up, man? Thanks for coming. 2 Australians, 2.5 years. And I was like, every time we have these we had a big argument on Saturday night, and every time I'm like, what's wrong with me? Didn't I grow up around this and don't I want to escape it? What's wrong with me? I've been in agencies since I was 19. What's wrong with me? And it's been kind of an interesting journey. I set up a hip-hop magazine when I was 19 or 20. Full color, 108 pages, with a CD-ROM. I used to not sleep until 5 a.m. while working in advertising. What the fuck is wrong with me? Can I swear? Okay. I get 1. I'll do 3. If I hear Australian and English accents, I start to swear or curse, as we say in America. And then, I was probably 13, 14 years into the agency life, and I moved to New York. What's wrong with me? People said, don't move there. You won't make any good work. You won't make any work. And so I moved there. What's wrong with me? Hard, moving into managerial roles with kids because I'm 10 years younger than a lot of the parents I know. Hard to build up a social circle. Is it because of me? Is it because of them? Is it because of New York? I don't know. What's wrong with me? Made a few bad career decisions. 15 to 18 years into my career, thought I was smarter than that. I did strategy. Bad career decisions. What's wrong with me? Well, there's probably a lot that's wrong with me. And part of my journey over the past 2 or 3 years is to work out that maybe there's another way to look at it. But lucky for you, I know what's wrong with you. So I don't know if any of you in this little strategy community that's built up called Sweathead, I asked them what's wrong with them. I had 47 answers, most of which came within an hour or so. There are a few names you might recognize from the top. I did localize the top. Everything else is alphabetically organized. And basically, it boils down to this last point. A lot of us, and I don't know exactly who you are. Maybe you're all perfect. Oh, is anyone here perfect? Anyone? You were like, I don't know what that was. You flinched. You flinched. If you think for a living, it's kind of difficult. Okay, often we think for a living because that's who we are. We exist down our heads. We're trying to find a way out, and there's not necessarily any way out. You sometimes attract people into your life who don't know that, who don't respect it, who are like, you're the difficult one. And over time, you realize that there's a bell ringing, and the bell is telling you that that's just who you are. That's who you are. So maybe this is not the right question. And the thing is, what I find interesting about a lot of these ideas that we hold on to ourselves, why do we need to be right about what's wrong with us? Why do we hold on to these things? Right and wrong, they're not very useful words. I think they're kind of useless words, but we use these words in our heads. And at some point, we were born not knowing these words and not knowing the last 3 slides here. At some point, we're like, oh God, something's wrong with me. What happened? What happened? For me, 3 or 4 or 5, and then it just continued for a very long time. For other people, maybe it's younger, for various reasons. I don't think these are very useful ideas. But I do think it's useful to think about, when you think about what's wrong with you, and I'm assuming stuff here, we only had one person flinch when I asked about perfection, that maybe it's not the right way to look at this thought. And over time, what I've started to realize is talking about strategy, which I do, and I do it to trigger people. I use the word strategy a lot. I could just have a conversation and say strategy, 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 not planning, Faris. Fuck planning. Second rude word. I've only got 3. Planning doesn't exist in America. It's strategy, my man. But strategy to me is a really interesting gateway to talk to people about who they are and how they are, because at some point, people who do strategy work are not going to be doing strategy work. Someone is not going to employ them. You're going to come out the other end, and that's a difficult transition for a lot of people to make. And I know that because I talk to thousands of people about this every year. Every day, tens of conversations about lost my job, trying to, let me back up and talk a little bit optimistically. Trying to get a job, can't get a job. No such thing as a junior strategist. I got a job, my boss doesn't trust me, I don't get to do the work I want to do, I don't get trained, I don't get mentored, and then they pop out the other end at some point after being the boss, and they're like, oh, what just happened? I'm 38. I'm in character right now. I'm 41. I'm 38. What just happened? This is it? Am I going to get another job? 41, 45. So at some point, you're going to come out the other end. And so what I find interesting when we talk about strategy is largely we're talking about philosophy. It's just that those two words are very vague, don't always mean a lot, and at the same time, super useful. So what I want to do, does anybody here do like a full-time strategy job? Hands? Mr. Perfect probably. Okay, so we've got a few people doing full-time strategy work, right? Or account planning, as they say in England. What I want to do is shine the torch back at you, and I want to run you through some of the concepts and the frameworks that I like to use to do strategy work, but then we're going to do it back at you to do personal work, okay? So just by starting, usually I have people with pens and paper, and I don't know what the vibe is right now because it's early in the day, but will you interact? Always get nervous, okay. So we're going to play a little game. It's called This or That. I can give you academic references for all of this, by the way, but I'm not going to. Guilford's Alternative Uses Test from 1957, whatever. Might have made up that date. This is a brick, except when it's not. What is it? What have we got? Cheese? Because I was in the animal thing. Yeah. Lego? Okay. Make it weirder, make it stranger, longer. Speaker. Okay, so what happens when we do this? I'm pointing this out in case you run workshops. People answer with like 1 or 2 words, and then I'm like, act like a comedian and give me lots of words. Make it stranger. Sorry? Yeah? Casper, what you got? It's a huge tower that's fallen over. Never heard that one before. Interesting.
I think it's the first prototype bowling ball.
First prototype of a bowling ball, yes. They also hadn't not invented the wheel at this point. Okay, so Guilford's Alternative Uses Test, and what they were trying to measure is they were trying to measure creativity, and they looked at novelty, quantity, and depth. Quantity, the number of ideas that someone could generate, is called the brick test, colloquially speaking. Novelty, have I heard it before? I've not heard of a tower falling down, Casper, and I've heard answers from thousands of people. Don't get a big head. And then depth. And comedians are very good at depth. And so I really do believe that whatever I don't care if you went to business school, I think better proxies, the metaphors I'm choosing, Faris, that the better proxies for strategy is to understand it as art and as stand-up comedy and writing. Okay? Any metaphor is imperfect. But to understand it, where stand-up comedy and writers are trying to notice things that people haven't and express them in ways that haven't been expressed before, that's kind of the job of someone who does strategy and advertising. I would like to think it's someone who's done strategy. It's the same job as someone who's done strategy in business as well. But, you know, different dictionary for that. Light bulb. What's a light bulb when you're not using it to light things up? You can destroy it, you can do whatever you want with it. No rules. You can't get anything wrong. Just give me one or two. An idea, yeah? Casper, just hold off. A weapon? Yeah, everyone does weapons. Violence comes up with all this stuff very often. Hot air balloon, yeah? Okay, Casper, what you got? A huge hand warmer. Okay, that's genetic. All right, this is a balloon. What can you do with a balloon that does not involve doing balloon things? Don't get carried away, Casper. Sorry? Yeah? Someone at the back. We've got a water bottle. I'm a conductor, but it's not working. Towards the back of the room, my introverts, what's up?
Sound effect generator.
A sound effect generator, I like it. An air carrier. Interesting. Yes, I like it. Okay, great. So you can't get it wrong. Casper, do you have something? Good, good. I feel better about myself now. Oh my God, what a show-off. So all this is lateral thinking, right? Edward de Bono has written tens and tens and tens of books. We use his language a lot. If you haven't, to me, this is the debit and credit. If you take a job, are there any accountants here? There are some accountants. If you take a job as an accountant, you can't take that job without understanding what debit and credit are. Amazingly, people can move into marketing and advertising roles without knowing what an idea is. Seems a little bit reckless. So Edward de Bono seems pretty legitimate with these ideas. And the way that I best understand it, which is, his name's here, it's not me, is to first of all understand linear thinking. I'm going to say some obvious stuff. Sometimes we need to hear the obvious things. Linear thinking is going down a line of thought so that when you think of Mumbai, what comes to mind? Give me three things. Traffic? Okay, that's linear thinking, right? We went down a line of thought. Linear is just a fancy word for line. And then we pick another topic, such as, was there a theme in the poem? I couldn't understand the poem earlier. Love, love. Ex-girlfriends. But be constructive. What comes to mind? Pain. Sorry, I see it. I see into things. It's very difficult to turn off. It's true. I'm joking, but it's totally true. What else comes to mind? Casper, what you got? Bollywood. Okay. Okay. So we took two themes. We went down two lines of thought. Lateral thinking is lateral is just a fancy word for going across. Okay, so that's what we did, and I just think that this is the most important thing that any of us can understand about what we do: ideas. And what I like to think of is like ideas in a secular, non-religious way, because sometimes we're in companies or we work with agencies where there's a silent adjective in front of a word like idea, or there's a silent adjective in front of the word strategy. And then, who gets to have those things? Who gets to do those things? And so again, if you're doing strategy work, I will argue that a key analogy, or a way to understand it is that the ideas of a strategist, largely speaking, are the ideas of a non-fiction writer until you then go and make stuff up. Where good non-fiction, every single paragraph is a clean, in good non-fiction, every paragraph is a clean sentence that changes the way you see the world, okay? So lateral thinking and ideas. And so the way that I've started to understand this, and this is super obvious, and I'm kind of embarrassed that I stumbled upon this a little bit later in life, is that lateral thinking is combining things that do not usually belong together in a useful way. The output of that is an idea. So ideas combine things that do not usually belong together in a useful way, and that is the act of creativity. So that's how those three concepts, which are very jargony, that's how those things sit for me. So lateral thinking and ideas is like the first kind of thing that is obvious, but it's something that we don't often do to ourselves. We do it to other people when we get paid and when we have a job code. 3 reasons to enjoy problems. I think optimism is really interesting. I'm not very good at it. But there are 3 reasons that I think problems are worth paying attention to. I'll start with the first one that will turn your bosses on, unless you are the boss, in which case it'll turn you on, and then don't give me weird eyes. The first is that problems help you sell. So Harvard Business Review published research about the end of solution selling, I'm going to say 6 years ago. And what they looked at is the phases of selling, the types of selling that companies did. There was feature-based selling, which is like, we've got the fastest motorcycle, we have the best camera, we have the tallest stage, okay? And then there was needs-based selling, or SPIN selling, S-P-I-N as an acronym. And that's why we all get these messages on LinkedIn, which is like, I'd love to find out your needs. Can we catch up for coffee? And my need is always not to have received that message. But that was a phase of, especially in tech, in B2B tech, let's catch up, I want to find out your needs. And then all that ever happens in that is that they're like, we have a faster motorcycle. It's like this weird guys. And then the third one is problem-based selling. And that actually helps change the conversation. If you go in and you say, whatever your context is, because the research was not about advertising or marketing, I respect your brief to us, I respect the procurement process, we've put all the numbers in the spreadsheets, it hurt, but we did it. And then we did some research, and we want to talk to you about the thing that we found that is different to your brief. That leads to a better sale, apparently, according to the Harvard Business Review. I don't usually do animations, so my slides jumped. The second reason to care about problems is problems captivate minds. We are wired to survive, and problems captivate us. So I think like being in a meeting and saying, we're very optimistic, we don't have problems, we just have opportunities, you're ignoring the brain and the fact that we use problems to survive. And engineers, for example, these days, they want to get at companies where they're going to solve big problems so that they can boast about it, so that they can feel stimulated about it. It's not just about boasting, so that's also really important. And the third thing is that there are solutions in problems. You look at, there are a lot of misattributed quotes from like Einstein to Bob Gill, famous English designer, about basically saying that if I had a day, a week, an hour to focus on a project, I would spend most of my time in the problem, and once you do that, there's solutions there. And then what we're trying to do with all of these things, and you can do this for yourself, but not just in the work, is to try to find the problem behind the problem behind the problem behind the problem. So that you're trying to solve some kind of root cause, which you will decide, maybe science will help you, but you're going to make an editorial decision, and to solve all the problems, not just the symptom. So that if you get sick a lot, it could be because, and you could take medicine for it, but it could be because you've got like an unhealthy stomach. Maybe you're still processing stuff when you were 4.5 years old, and it's better to go back to that. So the problem behind the problem. Most briefs that we all see are about awareness, conversion, relevance, salience, all this sort of stuff. Make me famous, get me 10 million views. It's not strategy in the way that I see it. You know, to me, strategy is trying to solve a specific problem. Insights, for example, and we're going to get into the actual the brain and how it all works, but I feel like the opposite of insights, just to play this game, the opposite of insights is denial. And it's because like all of you have, everyone has insights here all the time. To me, an insight is a revelation, it's a confession, it's probably taboo, it's an unspoken human truth. And then we're like, nah, I'm not allowed to think that. And so I think, catch yourself when you're denying something that's very true to you, and you're probably very close to what the industry would call an insight. There are ways to write these things. Here are some. And the reason that I like to talk about lateral thinking is that, again, on one side you have a line of thought, and on the other you have a line of thought, and there's a word deliberately put in the middle to say that there's something going on here. And all these things are doing is saying, hey, you thought this thing, but here's this other thing that you haven't thought. We're just reframing things. And whether or not any of this is new to any of you, I just share this because I love it. It's really interesting to me. And you can now listen to this in conversations that you have. You can see the words in writing, and you can practice these things if you want to get good at it. But it all comes back to insights, denial, revelations, and confessions. This is a new one. I don't know what this is. It's a cliff. Like, imagine you're trying to run to the happy guy. Happy, non-gender specific circle with a smiley face that's pointing one way. Working with companies, you know, we're trying to work out what's unique and motivating about them, and you start with the obvious things. What are the things that we have to have? You know, so a car needs 4 wheels. It's kind of obvious. You get it all out. And there are certain things that are like to have or nice to have, kind of cool. At some point, things like satellite navigation, kind of cool. Not going to buy the car because of that. and then you get things that I love to have. A lot of companies don't have these things, especially if they've been around a long time. You know, watching the Amul talk, was that 101 product innovations in 4 years? There's a lot of love to have there. Okay, that's pretty unusual, especially for a company that's been around for a long time. And what you're trying to get to is like the edge, the competitive advantage. And if you want a more conventional diagram, as a triangle. I just decided not to draw it as a triangle. But you can look top, yeah. So it's important to think about these things from a business point of view, and then we're going to get into the personal stuff. I see strategy, and we can define these words however we want, and no one has to buy anything that I say, but I see strategy as an informed opinion about how to win. You have information, what they call data these days, and then you have an opinion. And typically, it's about how to win. But that doesn't have to be so that someone else loses, so you get to throw in your own philosophy there. But at some point, what you're thinking strategically tries to rat out the problem. And so when I think about briefs that are like, we have low awareness, we have low relevance, low blah, 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 I'm like, nah, I don't like, that's just pretend stuff. I want to understand the obstacle in people's minds, their behavior in themselves that's preventing them from doing something, and sometimes it's definitely from buying something. But then you send strategy in to rat out the problem, to get it out of there. This is a little rubric. So if we put all that stuff together very quickly, problem, this is what I look for doing strategy work, but we're also talking about you, the human problem behind the business problem. This is all jargon, right? And the word like human doesn't mean a lot, really, but allow me to use it. What's the human problem behind the business problem? Insight, an unspoken human truth that sheds new light on the problem. So the insight is a little bit of an escape route from the problem. And the advantage, or the edge, I was getting frustrated with PIAS, so I went to PIES last week. It's new. But like, what makes you unique and motivating in people's minds? And again, we're talking business, and I'm talking you, and I'm going to talk about you specifically in a second. And then strategy, exclamation mark, because we use that word in a very loaded way. A new way to see you, or the brand or the business based on all of that, so that this thing solves that thing by putting those things together. And this is how I've tried to survive in America, where it's often you're working with really big companies, and it's hard to kind of get people to agree to a thing. And also within agencies, every agency works really, really differently. In Sydney, I feel like when I was working there, that there was enough of a shared culture that we kind of knew what we were all doing, we kind of knew what strategy and planning was to us. And then when you move overseas, you're like, oh, it's different here. What are the forcing functions that will help me get people to ask better questions, or to ask better questions, improve their relationships with each other, improve their relationships with clients? I was like, I'm just doing a drawing. I got 4 things for you. Let's do that more often than we don't. And I think we're going to be better off. So, I don't know. I was going to do this acting thing, so I'm going to do it. Okay. So the thing with all of this sort of stuff is like, why can't you apply this thinking to yourself? Like, what's in your way? And I don't know if this is really going to work. I was going to draw my shirt too, and I didn't. I just couldn't commit. I couldn't commit. I'm just going to... Casper, do you like to play hide and seek? Okay. So with what I'm talking about, because we're talking about business, and it's very easy to talk about business. This won't take long. It's okay. You're safe. You're safe. It's very easy to talk about these things as far as business, but I think the challenge is like, how do you talk about it when it comes to you? And here's what I've been thinking about the past couple of weeks, is that... Ready? Okay, we're going to do this. Does anybody play hide and seek with children? Here? Like 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds? Okay, so you've all had this moment. It's a black sheet. This is kind of weird. Okay. So we're playing, you're younger, you're 2, right? We're doing hide and seek. And I'm hiding from you, and you're going to come and find me, but you have to count to 5. Okay? So close your eyes. Count to 5, and then I'm hiding from you. Okay? All right. Very good at math. Okay, cool. Yeah, now you got to take the sheet off. We didn't rehearse this. Yeah, so if you played, you were exceptional at hide and seek. So if you've, you can sit down now, but thank you. was pretty dramatic. But the thing is, if you played hide and seek with a 2-year-old, sometimes you hide and then you get found and you keep hiding. Have you ever had that moment? Or like you literally stand in the corner, and you just stand there and you're hiding and they run past you. And sometimes you do it back to them and all this sort of stuff. I think a strategy career is a very easy place to hide. That's my point. It was a dramatic act out. That was performance art. I know it's a little bit advanced. Sometimes I do very advanced art. But I just think it's really important that if you do strategy work and you're spending your time trying to understand other people, maybe every now and then try to understand yourself. Don't wait 20 years. That's the point of my sheet bit. So when we come into like 3 things that I hear a lot from people who do full-time strategy work, and again, not all of you are going to relate to that. This is more for the emo people in the crowd, is we hear this phrase, I'm a lone wolf. Does anybody identify with this? Okay, give me some hands so I don't feel alone. Oh yeah. Has anybody looked up what a lone wolf is? That'll mess with you. Because none of you are lone wolves, because you all work with other people. None of you have been kicked out of a tribe by a large alpha male wolf while trying to find your other tribe and then have just wandered around like, what's up with all of that? So none of us are actually lone wolves. And at some point, these words that we use, we need to challenge them a little bit because they're really easy to identify with. And I think sometimes if we identify with these words, they can do more harm than good. So a little bit of a game. Could I run, I was just trying to run, this is a little bit flippant, but could I run through some of these thoughts applying strategy frameworks to us? Okay, so problem, let's say the business issue is that you don't feel that you're getting promoted, you don't feel that you're doing good work, you find it hard to work with people, and you're like, I'm such a lone wolf. And you know, I talk to a lot of people who are the single strategist in like 100 people companies or more, and they feel isolated, right? But at some point, I just think it's worth asking yourself, like, is that a useful thing to feel? And then if you feel it and act upon it, is it a useful thing to act upon? So what if you feel like a lone wolf because you're trying to protect yourself? That's okay. That's natural. But what if you protecting yourself is keeping you away from what you want, which is to work with people better, to do better work? Maybe there's a way to reframe how you think about yourself as an outsider. I definitely identify with it as an outsider. I don't feel very comfortable in crowds, except this one, where maybe your mentality just helps you see things a little bit differently. Yeah? And this is a strategy statement. Tell myself that I can see new ways to bring things together. I don't know. Maybe it's useful. I'm not saying it's science, but maybe it's a useful thing to think through. That if you identify as being a lone wolf and being isolated, is that useful to you? Is there another way to look at it? Maybe it's your way to get perspective on things, which Viktor Frankl, who wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, just after he came out of concentration camps in World War II, as a psychologist, talks about the importance of being able to shift perspective on things. Okay? So that's lone wolf. This one we hear a lot, imposter syndrome. I heard this for the first time when I was doing a talk in Boston at this big design conference. I was invited there. I did this little talk in the northern woods of Minnesota, and a pretty well-known designer called Debbie Millman invited me and a friend to do a talk in Boston. And I got there and I was like, it was super corporate, first of all. And like, look at this. I'm dressed up today. But it was super corporate. And I was like, I don't know, I feel weird doing this talk. Like, I don't belong here. And my friend said, it's 5 years ago now, that's imposter syndrome. And I was like, yeah, I'm an outsider. That's useful to me. I never feel like I'm judging myself at all times. I just sat under a freaking black sheet. Like, what is all that about? Who are you to be here doing any of this? And now I hear this phrase all the time. And it actually comes from Dr. Clance and Dr. Imes. And if you actually read about, if you use this word, or you identify as being an imposter, or you use the phrase imposter syndrome, Google it, look it up. Don't just use it because it makes you sound kind of cool with other people, because it might or might not be true, and then it might or might not be useful. Imposter syndrome usually deals with things like high expectations, perfectionism, feeling like an outsider, never feeling like you're performing very well. Okay? But all those things are subjective. They're relative. Who's the judge? No one's judging it. You're doing it to yourself. So there might be another way to look at it, which is maybe that's a little, basically, maybe that's a little noise in my head that is like, I need to try a little bit harder. I need to practice sitting under black sheets with an 11-year-old, taking them off you at least once before getting up on a stage, right? Clarity comes up a lot as well. So I'm a little bit new to this thinking. I didn't go to Oxford or Cambridge or England schools. But clarity, I think, is an interesting thought because it's something that we declare that we have. And a lot of strategy people and creative people, they're not sure if they're clear. They're not sure if they have an insight. Part of that is, and it's the same with stand-up comedy, part of that is about understanding that there's a whole domain of expertise and you're trying to get through to the edge of it so that you try to come up with something that you haven't heard before. And so academics, when they talk about insights, they talk about historically new and psychologically new insights. So that you could go to stand-up comedy with the person next to you, you hear a joke, and you say, I've heard that before, which means it's not historically new, and the person next to you is laughing their pants off because it's psychologically new to them. So there is a journey with any kind of expression where you're trying to understand what's come before to get to the thing that maybe hasn't come before. But clarity is something that we decide. And I do think there's a peaceful way out of it, and this is not to say that there's a dogmatic truth with any of this sort of stuff or science, but I think you can cut yourself some slack and enjoy your confusion. Like, I think just admitting that you're going to spend an hour, a day, a week not knowing is actually pretty cool. But often when we're starting out, and it's not just starting out, we think we have to have the right answer in an hour, put it on a piece of paper, and then we get a promotion. That's not how it works. It's confusing until it isn't. It's clear. It was not clear until it is, and you decide that. Until you share it with other people, because everything that we do has some kind of social dynamic, some kind of social construct within it. So this might be a gift or it might be a curse. But the point of all of this is that at some point, the power of what we do doing strategy work is to turn problems into power. Your curse is you might turn yourself into a problem along the way. I know this. This is my journey. I'm trying to get out of this. I'm like 25 years into the second half of that, and I'm like a week into the first half of that. It's difficult. You know, if you do a lot of work that does come from numbers, whatever, and intuition, and if you feel all the time, and if it's difficult for you to turn that off, which it is for me, and it is for a lot of the people here, you think you're the problem. People tell you that. Why do you think so much? Why are you criticizing that? Why are you thinking about that in a different way? Just be quiet. Just like come to the meeting, follow the agenda, be quiet, and then we go home, right? You can't turn it off. There's no on or off button. There's just ways to channel it. And that's kind of like been my personal lesson. And what's weird is that the more you read about this stuff, it's not a new lesson at all. Probably thousands of years ago, there's like words about all this sort of stuff. So at some point along the way, when you grow up with like a need to express, a single mom with a lot of trauma, a younger sister that you never felt you could protect, all you can do with that is like think, if I'm sensitive, what is the benefit of being sensitive? Because people can say you're sensitive, and they might mean that in different ways. But being sensitive means that I feel the energy, and maybe I can put it into words. Maybe that's my thing. When I catch up with strategy people who feel lonely, who feel like they're imposters, who feel confused, maybe my thing is to feel that, and then try to help them get somewhere with it in a way that they decide, not me. So all I'm saying is at some point, you're going to need to play hide and seek with a 2-year-old under a sheet. Be very careful about whether you're hiding there, whether you're not doing your own work. Maybe you've all come through this and you're way more advanced than me. This is new to me. And it's in that spirit that I share it. This is kind of my point of view right now, just to close this out, is that I kind of see creativity as the opposite of neglect. To say that something is the opposite of something is very simplistic, but I think it's a fun game. And every now and then I sit down and I write about, like, what am I doing here? As in, like, why am I still alive? Didn't expect to live this long. Why am I still alive? And the word neglect pops up a lot. And then I think about a lot of the violence that goes on in the world. I think a lot about our relationships with each other. I think about the fact that apparently I've worked in a creative industry that isn't always very creative. And I'm like, what's the opposite of neglect? To me, it's creativity. It's self-expression. Creativity is paying attention. There's a certain compassion and love that comes from that for the self and then for the world around you. And I don't believe that all these ideas that I'm saying are necessarily Western or about the individual. Because religion in some parts of the world tries to help you do these kinds of things. And the idea of doing it together, I think it's more powerful. You can keep creativity to yourself, but I think it's more powerful to do it together. So, point is, if you do strategy work, every now and then, let's say once every 5 years, please consider doing strategy to yourself. That's all I got. Thanks for having me.